Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Sneha Koshy, and you're watching Beyond the Headline. Chief Minister Stalin has a message for newlyweds in Tamil Nadu. While attending the wedding function of a DMK district secretary at Nagapattinam, he urged young couples to have children immediately. MK Stalin said newlyweds were earlier advised to not have kids immediately following marriage. However, the same advice should not be followed now. I will not tell you to not have children hastily. In fact, have children immediately. But I have one request. Chief Minister Stalin said, give them beautiful Tamil names. Why? Well, this statement comes amid MK Stalin-led government's strong pushback against centre's national education policy as well as delimitation plans. MK Stalin has opposed centre's delimitation plans, accusing it of penalizing the southern states that took responsible measures to control population growth successfully, in contrast to the northern counterparts. He has opposed delimitation based on population alone. So what does data say? Let's look at the south first. TFR, that's the total fertility rate. Tamil Nadu is at 1.8%, Andhra Pradesh 1.7%, Telangana 1.8%, Kerala 1.8%, Karnataka 1.7%, contrasted to its northern counterparts. Bihar at 3% of TFR, Madhya Pradesh 2%, Rajasthan 2%, Gujarat 1.9%, Uttar Pradesh at 2.4%. So South has done a remarkable job over decades when you compare it to its northern counterparts, and this essentially is the political argument that do not have delimitation exercise based on population alone, because then, as MK Stalin claims, you are penalizing the South alone. So what is the impact that's likely? At least from one school of thought, of which MK Stalin is also part of it. Now, MK Stalin says there could be two aspects to deal with this. One, where Tamil Nadu may lose 8 or Tamil Nadu may gain 8. In any case, Chief Minister Stalin says Tamil Nadu will be the big loser along with the big losers from down south. Like, for one instance, where we are looking at the gains that may be made, Karnataka may gain 8, Tamil Nadu may gain 2, Andhra Pradesh 3, Telangana 3 and Kerala 1. But look at the northern counterparts. UP is expected to gain 48, Bihar 30, Madhya Pradesh 18, Maharashtra 20 and Rajasthan 19. Kerala, by the way, was -1. So would lose 1, not gain 1. That's the contrast between South and North. If you look at the delimitation exercise, there's another possibility, another school of thought that talks about the losses in that case also. South would lose much harder. Now, Amit Shah has said there won't be any injustice to Tamil Nadu. He said this last week. He also said Prime Minister Modi has made this clear in Lok Sabha that no southern state will lose any seats. The government will protect your interests. Amit Shah reiterated this on February the 26th. So, even as we go ahead to look in data and we have specialists to talk about all of this, ladies and gentlemen, having a child or deciding to have a child involves several critical decisions in an urban landscape, in urban India. And more often now than earlier, it isn't just a fallout of marriage that you get married and therefore you have children. It's a choice. A choice that's impacted by a series of decisions, from planning financially to maneuvering career choices, both for husband and wife, to working around creating support systems which may be there, which may need to be strengthened, or just need to be created from scratch. And these are just about immediate decisions that really need to be taken into account, including the health of the spouse for that matter, of the couple for that matter. So, unlike earlier, as the world changes and struggles with a changing demography, how much privilege should and can political parties have to tell you have to have more babies or you should not have or that your rights are going to be directly dependent on how many children you have. It's politics, rights, and your representation, and unfortunately, all somehow very closely linked to women and their womb. Before we go any further, workplace maternity benefits elude at least 94% working Indian women. And women's labor force participation rate, as it falls or whenever it has fallen when they have young children particularly, with childcare still cited as a key factor keeping them out of the workforce. Keeping all of these things in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to a very nuanced discourse. Let me just introduce my panelists at this point. I'm being joined by Poonam Muttreja, who's a ED Population Foundation India, Dr. Lakshmi Ashwin Gowda, who's a BJP spokesperson, Professor Jyotsna Tirunagari, who's a national spokesperson for TDP, as well as Selim Dhanidharan, who's a national spokesperson for DMK. I'm also being joined by Mrunalini Deshmukh, who's a family lawyer. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining me. Let me just start with you at this point, Ms. Poonam Muttreja. A very simple question. And you know, we have so many paradigms to cover even as we get into this debate. We met last time few months ago, and we were talking about India's TFR in comparison to, say, other countries where the population has dipped so much, the productivity, the production rights have changed, so reproduction rights have changed so much, and so many aspects of the population. But today it's very, very different contours. My first very simple question to you, Ms. Muttreja, from what it was in the beginning, and that's population control, to what it is today, how significant or insignificant is it when political parties come forth and appeal to people to have more children or not to have?
So I very strongly believe that politicians, political parties, policymakers have no right to enter a woman's bedroom and decide how many children she's going to have or not have. Women's reproductive rights and women's aspirations are totally not understood by our political leaders. That's very clear. It is not only unwise but dangerous to make such suggestions, and futile. Women are not switches you can switch on and off. Today you have more children, tomorrow you have less children. Yes, still until few months ago we were saying Indian women should have less children. And it's not as though women's reproductive decisions are dictated by political compulsions or how the government manages or doesn't manage the delimitation exercise. Finally, you know, women's autonomy is something that cannot be used against them, and nor can it be used as an instrument of population stabilization. And finally, it will not work. So why are we always putting the burden on women for not being able to manage the whole issue around delimitation or population management? You know, there is nothing less demeaning and uncomfortable for me as a woman to hear that for every solution lies with women having more children or women having less children. You know, their careers, their aspirations, their income opportunities, everything gets impacted by the number of children they have when they have children. Early children actually is contributed significantly to women's education, women's opportunities, being stymied, coming in their way. So at this point, I think we should send out a very strong message with data to the politicians to stay away and not use women as instruments for their lack of management or lack of vision to find solutions.
I think important point, and before I go ahead to our other panelists as well to get their responses on this, Ms. Poonam Muttreja, I want to ask you for a larger question. And I don't want to get you into politics of it all, but again, unfortunately, what's happened is all of this has very closely become interlinked again, as I said, not just your rights of being represented as a state, but also your right to be represented as a woman, as a citizen of the country, vis-a-vis your reproduction rights. Now, when anyway these two seem to come together, how do you look at the entire discourse around delimitation, whether it be the opposition from South, in this case you have Chief Minister Stalin who has said something, or you have the propositions that have come up from the center about a delimitation that's going to possibly be revolved around population. As a person who studies population, does this concern you?
It does concern me because no state, no government should be penalized for doing well. You know, its population stabilization is a reflection of not just numbers increasing or decreasing. It's about education for women. It's about good health services, including family planning services, which is what the South provided, and greater autonomy for women to make decisions, which has led to population stabilization, which the North badly needs to invest in more. And we need to have reach a balance. Why? Let's look at it historically. You know, we froze the delimitation exercise in India once in 1976, then for the second time in 2001, because there was so much disparity between the population in the north and the south. That still holds. The last 5 census shows to us that there is huge differences still. Though I believe UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, many of the northern states are catching up. So why can't we find a solution which we agreed upon in this country historically? Why can't we postpone the delimitation as one possibility? Second, we can look at delimitation differently. We can look at aggregate, you know, how well states have done on economics, on women's literacy, education in general, giving good health services. So on the basis of those and economic advancement, we could have, you know, there are many instances and examples we can take from Germany, America, Japan, where they've dealt with it differently. Third point that I want to make is that delimitation, and final point, you know, should not penalize states that have done well. It should be a win-win situation. We cannot have a situation where there is such a strong division between the South and the North. We have to work towards integrating the country better together. You know, there are opportunities people from the North, for instance, have to go to the South looking for jobs because there's high unemployment in the northern states. So a country has to live in cooperation. We must have a win-win situation where we make sure we find the best solution. And it is possible. There are many solutions that can be put on the table instead of fear-mongering or not debating. The delimitation discussion should be debated in India.
Okay, let me just get in Salem Dharnidharan at this point. Salem Dharnidharan, of course, delimitation is a big concern. And there are concerns over whether southern states are going to lose out. That being one part of it, is there somewhere an awareness that possibly what Chief Minister Stalin said can put women several feet, I mean, it may just force women to step back, to take steps backwards than forwards? I mean, before getting into politics also, Salem Dharnidharan, I want to start with asking this question because, you know, this is hopefully we are going to get into a discourse which is far more nuanced than just political rhetoric. How best to start with you? Is there a concern over how this played out, how Mr. Stalin said it?
See, I think let me not be interrupted because I'll come exactly to your point, but I will have to explain my way of explaining. See, we have to look at the larger picture. The
Sure.
point here is not that we want women to have more children, families to have more children. The point is that we do not want delimitation whereby constituencies are redrawn based on population, whereby South Indian states lose out. That's the larger picture. Also, I'll have to remind you, DMK as a party comes out of Justice Party and Dravida Kalaham. Way back in 1927, Periyar wrote a book, Why Did Women Get Enslaved? And since then, why shouldn't women get remarried?
I'm
Way
aware.
back in
I'm
1920s,
aware.
we've been following that till date, which is why DMK was the first party to bring about legislation for equal rights to women in properties in 1989, amending the Hindu Act. And again, in 2021, immediately my leader came to power. He was the one who said government school girls will get 1,000 rupees if they go to college. Pudumai Pen Thittam. Immediately after that, the gross enrollment ratio of girls entering colleges nearly doubled in Tamil Nadu. That apart from the 1,000 rupees aid they get, apart from the free bus pass they get. So what I'm trying to say is Tamil Nadu also has a twice higher number of labor for participation of women. So the point was not to make the society regressive. The point was it was told in a lighter tone to ridicule the union government, which is disincentivizing Tamil Nadu for following family planning in 1970s in national interest, listening to the union government. He says earlier we say be happy, do whatever you want. Now because of the union government action, we may have to say that have children as soon as possible because our rights are at stake. It had to be taken in that context. He never put any pressure on women or any families. It was a political pun intended at the state of affairs in the country. Am I being clear on this point? Because when delimitation will happen, the states like Tamil Nadu would not have any political voice. It's a big concern. I think it's a very big concern. I'm thankful to my leader who have raised this issue. But the issue was first raised by news channels. Times of India wrote an article about it. India Today, all the channels. So now don't come and tell me that it's a political issue.
No, no,
News
Salem,
channels have started
I
writing
by
about
no
it 2 years
means
back
am
itself.
questioning the
Research
legitimacy
forums have
of the
started writing about
concern
it.
that is being raised. By no means. By no means Tamil Nadu, I mean, Tamil Nadu is fully justified to raise the concerns, and we all are very much aware of the challenges that are. My question today, and we have been part of debates like this, but I'm just asking you a very simple question. When a chief minister makes for what you call a political pun, does it land well?
Of course, he is also have done schemes, incentives, policies to make sure that Tamil Nadu, the women are empowered, which is why Tamil Nadu is the number one state in India for women empowerment, from labor force to participation to a number of women working in factories. About 67% of the entire women workforce in factories is in Tamil Nadu. So that's not the point. The point is, it is to communicate a message in the language in which the union government can understand. That see, you disincentivize, then you're forcing us to do this. That's about it. And people of Tamil Nadu have understood that, because in the context, he's the most progressive chief minister, more so for the opposite gender. That is why they love him. That is the point. You come and talk to people here, they will explain. You have to take the entire speech in the entire
But let
context.
me
When you
just get in
translate these
Dr.
things,
Lakshmi
the
Ashwin
nuances
Gowda.
will be lost. The way
Dr.
in which he
Lakshmi
said.
Ashwin Gowda, please respond to what Salem Dharan has said. My question to you, Dr. Lakshmi, is very simple. Has the central government failed? I mean, while you may accuse your rivals, political rivals, of fear mongering, as the BJP has been claiming, has discourse and dialogues completely failed, fallen apart?
Mr. M.K. Stalin claims against the constitutional delimitation process itself is not justified. As Ms. Poonam Muttreja has rightly pointed out, it is the total discomfiture for the women's autonomy over her reproductive health and reproductive choices. Being unaware of the constitutional provisions and the mandates, because the entire delimitation process is mandated by the constitutional provisions of Article 82 and 170 for the Parliament and the State Legislative Assembly, respectively. And any attempt to speak about this constitutional provision and mandates is totally illogical. Uh, our Honorable Prime Minister has given clarification that this wouldn't affect the southern Indian states in terms of number of seats. They won't get affected. And our Honorable Home Minister has also reiterated the same. Despite this, East time and again has chosen to make illogical and myopic statements by being in prestigious constitutional post just to fulfill his parochial political interest. Here, he is least bothered about the welfare of the people and reproductive health of women and the development of his own state, and he is least bothered about all. We strictly condemn his illogical and myopic statements, because he must understand the
Dr. Lakshmi, I'll
constitutional
ask you this question again.
Yes.
The delimitation exercise is likely to happen in 2026. You
Correct.
quoted Poonam Muttreja right now on what she said about a constitutional mandate. But she's also clearly specified two earlier instances when delimitation process was postponed, were kept in abeyance. Why? Because of the stark difference in TFRs between the North and the South. 2026, if the delimitation is going to happen as the centre has proposed, why has there not been any dialogue till now on how the delimitation is going to happen?
Our Honorable Prime Minister and also our Honorable Home Minister has given clarification that this wouldn't affect any number of seats in southern Indian states. They will ensure that there will be uniform rise in the number of states throughout the state.
Can I just come back on this? I have a
This wouldn't
clarification.
affect in any way the southern Indian states. Mr. M. K. Stalin should understand this. Without understanding this, just by making all hollow myopic statements in front of the people he voted them to power, is totally meaningless. We strictly condemn this.
Salem Dhanidhar, and go ahead.
Can I come in? No. I think it's completely wrong. See, the Home Minister is also trying to manipulate. He says the number of seats won't reduce. So the seats won't reduce because population will reduce. But what will reduce? Proportion of seats from Tamil Nadu and south of India will reduce. The proportion of seats in Tamil Nadu right now is at 7.2%, entire parliament, Lok Sabha. It will reduce to 5%. Entire South India contributes about 25% of the parliament. That will reduce to about 17%. The overall seat may increase slightly, but the proportion of seats will drastically reduce. That is the point. And again, Article 82 says constituencies have to be demarked based on population. But why what is frozen? Because of the family planning that was envisaged in 1970s by Indira Gandhi. And even Vajpayee, being a BJP Prime Minister, did not want to disincentivize states like Tamil Nadu, which is why he again extended the freeze for another 25 years. Either the BJP should freeze the delimitation, or temporarily freeze it, or permanently erase it, or temporarily freeze it, call the states for negotiation and work out on a formula, right? But you're not doing that. So here, unlike any other bill, the bill need not be passed.
Dr. Lakshmi, please respond. You have a right to respond before I go and proceed to others.
The delimitation exercise would have been done. That's why it's very pertinent.
Any attempt to maneuver, any attempt to
Dr.
erase,
Lakshmi,
any
please
attempt
respond.
to delete, any attempt to delete, any attempt to maneuver, any attempt to erase the constitutional provisions is totally unacceptable. Mr. DMK spokesperson is also...
Then what happened in 1976 and 2001? Was it unconstitutional, ma'am?
Chief Minister.
So what Vajpayee did?
No, in 1976 and 2001, when the proposed delimitation were put on hold, was it unconstitutional then?
No, they just given the froze. It's the high time for to conduct a delimitation process, because they've sensed to give proportional representation and due representation throughout the country. And they've also ensured that this will not affect.
But that was the whole argument at that time, Dr. Lakshmi. The whole argument was the lack of representation, the stark difference and the discriminatory nature of how the population representation would play out on the ground. But very quickly, let me just get in Professor Jyotsna Tirunagari at this point, who's a TDP national spokesperson. Dr. Jyotsna, how do you respond to what Ms. Lakshmi has just said? Dr. Lakshmi has made one thing. I mean, it's interesting, and it's interesting to have you because TDP has raised this concern. TDP has raised this concern about the falling TFR, about the increasing elderly population, about the changing demography. But how do you look at delimitation?
Good evening, everyone. But I think that's the difference between TDP and other parties, I would say. When we spoke about TFR, when we spoke about the state, demographies, when we spoke about the financial condition in the state, when we spoke about the younger generation and the older generation disparity, we spoke about, the state on a whole. We were concerned about the holistic development of the state. We were not concerned about anything politically. And let me put it very clearly here, Sneha, because this is important. Okay. I've been in a couple of debates with Poonam ma'am also, and I really, really admire the way she puts a point. point. And yes, it is very important. And even on this debate, I have almost including you, I have 5 women, if I'm not wrong. So all the 5 women, we have our rights there, and we literally cannot, we are not just baby making machines. Absolutely not. But the point here is linking delimitation to, having more babies is something I'm not for it. I'm definitely, and even TDP is not for it. When we spoke about having more babies, and when we spoke about, different aspects, we spoke about the state condition on a whole and the society on a whole. It's just not delimitation for us. Let me put it very clear here.
I agree.
And yes,
I agree.
when challenging, when
No,
when
there's
challenging,
no doubt about that. The political context, the social context of when TDP spoke up was absolutely what you are
yes.
saying.
Now,
There's no two
now,
doubts about it, and we all had discussed it in details.
now,
But my question, Professor
yes.
Jyotsna, is a very simple one. How do you look at delimitation? The whole, I mean, it was you who raised politically, you were among the first parties also, at least over the last 1 year, to have raised this concern as well. So when you talk about this entire issue, when you talk about delimitation, as it were, does it bother you that your state is likely to be represented less?
See, I would not comment on that because we still don't have the norms and procedure SOPs set. Let me put it very clearly, Sneha, here. Because we have to understand the norms and procedures and SOPs are not set yet. And yet again, I would say that this is high time we go for census. Until unless we have census done, until unless we have all these things done, we cannot go for delimitation. We cannot go for it. I'm also worried about women reservation in the houses. I'm really worried about that as well. So it's just not one aspect that revolves around it. I have multiple aspects revolving around it. But again, one insensitive statement I would say is, just because you want to have your state being represented more at the central level, you are asking, the couples to have more babies. I think that's a pretty insensitive statement. Just for having more seats. My concern would have been if Stalin ji or somebody from DMK would have spoken about the state logistics, the state financial situations, the state, societal situations, all of it. I would really have appreciated their talk. Limiting it to politics is not something that I would appreciate.
But the counter, and I'll go to Salem Dhanidharan to respond to you, but before that, the counter that the DMK is saying, where is the dialogue from the BJP, from your alliance partners? No one knows what's happening. It's going to be mid of 2025 in a few months from now, but nobody knows what's going to happen in 2026. Why is the BJP not talking about it?
See, if this was the same situation they said about Waqf Bill also, but there was a joint parliamentary committee that was constituted. Parties, all of them have represented, and in fact, stakeholders were called on, and all of their opinions were taken. And I believe even in this context, definitely there would be a dialogue that would have happened. And the answer, I would say, I would very categorically put it as answer, Sneha, because it was the point raised by Stalin ji. That was the reason Home Minister Amit Shah ji gave an answer to it. Simple. He raised a point, he gave an answer. But the central government has not yet come with...
Okay. Salem Dhanidharan, please respond before I go to Ms. Mrunalini. Salem Dhanidharan, go ahead.
Madam, firstly and foremost, we can't confuse creating a bill like a Waqf bill with delimitation, because of like Waqf bill, you have to create a bill and you need majority. But delimitation as such, you don't need anything. Naturally it'll happen. You need to do something in order for it to not happen. That's why we're asking the union government to either completely get away with it or put a temporary freeze and then call us for discussion. Because December 31st will come and then 2026 year will come, then delimitation eventually has to happen based on the number of based on the population of the constituency. Right, that's what it is in the constitution. So you have to understand the seriousness. So you put a temporary freeze at the least immediately, then discuss with us. Then it's okay. Right. But again, census and delimitation are not intertwined. But census should have happened in 2021 itself, immediately after COVID, at least in 2022. That is the union government's lack of administrative abilities. Or maybe they didn't want to do census because they wanted census to come after delimitation can come. That is after 26, so that they can do delimitation before 29. And because it's gerrymandering, it helps their constituencies in the northern belt, northern Indian states, whereby disproportionately higher number of seats would have come for the BJP. So maybe that's why they want to do it. So
the DMK person, sir, I request you.
No, I'm saying because BJP is disproportionately stronger in north of India.
No.
If they will get higher proportion of seats, the advantage is for them in the election. The
Okay, Professor Jyotsna, I'll give you exactly 40 seconds and I need to go to Miss Mrunalini Deshmukh after that, who's been very patiently waiting. Professor Jyotsna, 40 seconds.
One request to DMK spokesperson or even for the party entirely is do not try to create a difference between northern and southern states. We are Indians and we are trying to, put India on top
No
in
one
the
is trying to
entire
create any
world.
divide.
I would request you to talk as an Indian. You have any concern? Let's talk as an Indians. I think that's my point, Sneha.
I think Miss Jyotsna, it's not about, I mean, Salem has a right to respond, but look at the numbers, and I'll go to Miss Poonam in a bit for that only. Look at the numbers. Andhra, Telangana, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, look at the way their TFRs have dropped
Yes.
over the last decades for that matter, and compare it to the north. There is a difference. I mean, how you play it out politically is a different thing, but I think this is not created, this is not artificial. But let me just get in at this point, Miss Mrunalini. Miss Mrunalini, let's just pause for a bit. Let's just look at India's urban families. Salem, just give me a few minutes, Salem, I'll come to you, but let me spend some time with Miss Mrunalini. I mean, making a choice to have a child. Gone is that era decades ago when somebody said, don't have more kids, have less kids. Now, to even decide whether you want one kid or whether you want two kids or whether you don't want any kid is a very deliberated attempt. It's not just a natural fallout of a marriage. There's a lot at play, a lot at stake.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me over in this discussion, which deals with delimitation. But I think we are forgetting the basic fabric or the structure, which is the family structure. And I think that plays a very important part. I mean, a child is born in a family. A couple gives birth to a child. So is it not that couple's or that family's choice whether to have one child, two children, 3, 4, 5, 6 is one part of it. Secondly, and more importantly, for a representation, what is the most important thing is the child and his interest and best welfare, as has been put down in the Constitution. Number 3, more importantly, the right to life is that of a woman. A woman will have a choice to decide, not the politicians, not the other provisions of law to decide how many children or children that she wants to have and she wants to do. As Poonamji very rightly put it, what are the fallouts of having giving birth to a child? It just doesn't end there. In fact, it's the beginning for a woman, for a mother to make a lot of sacrifices about her career, to make a lot of sacrifices about the other things in her life. Now, when is that not to be balanced, or whether a statement by Mr. Stalin, and I think now Mr. Salem has said that was said in a lighter vein, that has no basis. He did not mean what he said, but it was just a bit of jocular manner. If that is what it is, then probably I give him that.
I mean, it was a political pun. It was a political messaging attempted, is what Mr. Salem has said.
But the point here is, if it's a political pun, then that's fine. Maybe that's his sense of humor, and probably we all appreciate that. But the point still remains, and I'm coming from a purely family sort of structure, which is the only structure which will decide how many children one should have, how many of them should not be there. Earlier, as you rightly said, there was a population explosion. There were some compulsory measures which were taken to control the population. And there were certain exigencies also that happened. Now things are changing, and today everybody has. Today, if you see in urban India and most urban metros, the couple cannot afford a child more than one. It is impossible even to afford a child. And in this backdrop, to make such statements, and I again give it to him, that's a political pun, to such statements that you should have more babies so that there's more representation, I don't know, somewhere it's not gelling. There has to be a little more of concern at the ground reality, what is happening. Having babies is not the only thing. The affordability also is one thing. And also to be able to balance your career, your personal life, and raising a child. Now, I think if these are the points which are not considered, then I think we are making a basic mistake. We are forgetting the main structure on which this country is based is the family, and the child is an offspring of the family. And if that is not taken care of or not considered in the manner that it should be taken with sensitivity, then I think we are somewhere missing the whole discussion going somewhere, which is not, in my understanding, really, really very fruitful. So we cannot sacrifice the child and the family at the altar of any of these things, whether it's political, constitutional, or otherwise.
Selim Dhanidharan, I can see you smile, but the same question that I really started with, and before I go to Poonam Muttreja, for a very important point of how there is a south and north divide. But Selim, is there, again, I'm asking you this question because of the nuances involved, because it's DMK, because it's MK Stalin, because obviously there's a lot of concerns over delimitation. But usage of words and the manner in which it is used is also very, very inherent in today's politics. It's watched, it's followed very closely.
See, firstly and foremost, I'll answer Professor Josna when she said I'm trying to create a north-south divide. I'm not trying to create any divide. In fact, only for the sake of the country's unity did Tamil Nadu religiously follow the family planning decision of the union government, which was launched in the 70s. So all I'm trying to seek is justice, because what happens is that proportion of seats in UP in the parliament reduced from 14% to 20%, Madhya Pradesh from 4.6% to 6.5%, Rajasthan from 4% to about 6.5%, and several other states where BJP is strong. And then in South it reduces. Of course, I'm not against the states, but we need justice. We can't be disincentivized because we did something right or the union government asked us to do. Now, going back, I think we're all not getting the actual point. My chief minister, the most progressive chief minister in the country, any policy you have taken, it's first, he says woman first, right? That's his focus. But this was not to incentivize women to have more babies. Is there any policy that's come out in the government saying we will give you some grant or penalize you? Nothing. It was just told it was told to make the union government understand, right? Listen, this delimitation, what you're doing is wrong. It is to take a message to Tamil Nadu people that delimitation is arriving. That it's making a joke at the union government.
Point,
and I don't, Tamil Nadu, women in Tamil Nadu are very smart. I don't think they'll get carried away by it. Right? It's not because the chief minister made this joke, they're going to make more babies.
Okay. Poonam Muttreja, come in. I want to build on the point of what Selim has just touched on. And this is important for our viewers. We are talking about the north and south divide, as it were. But let me just take these numbers out. Andhra Pradesh, back in 1992-93, had 2.6 as its fertility TFR. Now, around 2019-21 is 1.7. Telangana, 2015-16 was 1.8. 1921 is 1.7. Similarly, Kerala in the 90s was around 2. It is 1.8 now. Tamil Nadu was 2.5 in the 90s. It's at 1.8 now. Karnataka was at 2.9. It is at 1.7. Now, bring this in a complete picture for us, Poonam Muttreja. For an average viewer who doesn't follow population and TFR and so on and so forth very closely, is just wondering what this entire furore is about. Why is this a concern when we look at the full India picture and the right to be represented? What does this data from the South really tell us?
So the data from the South actually tells us that what the South has achieved, the whole country and they themselves should be very proud of. The achievement of fertility decline or stabilization is not just the government's victory. It is as much as women's victory and women's contribution to having fewer children, controlling their fertility, working hard to negotiate family planning, etc. As far as the North is concerned, we have a situation where they did not make the investment in literacy, better governance, health, and they should not benefit because they didn't invest in women, nor should they be penalized. No one in a country should be penalized. Let's not look at it as a north-south divide. It's a difference. The South has done better than the North. It doesn't divide the North from the South or the other way. See, there is huge unemployment in the North today. Where are the migrants from UP, Bihar, many states? They're coming to the South. It's one country. And it is, in fact, the South has to, instead of worrying about more people, they count on the migrants who come, who will add to their population. Second, in North India, there is a huge unmet need that women have for family planning. No child should be unwanted. The government has to invest more without penalizing states or countries. We have to push or nudge the North Indian states to have greater access for women to education, health, and nutrition and jobs, etc. But finally, in terms of the numbers, it is one country, when we look at TFR of India, that we have reached population stabilization. We look at the whole country. And finally, on the delimitation exercise, I will still say two things. Nobody should be punished for doing better. So good solutions should be found. And at the same time, don't use women or take joke or pun about women's wombs, women's fertility, women's choices. I hope this won't happen again.
Okay,
and I hope this
Poonam
debate will
Muttreja, I'm
contribute
afraid
to
I'm
that.
totally out of time.
No
In fact, I wanted to go to
politician
Salen
has the
and
right
Dr.
to
Lakshmi
do
for
that.
one more round of response along with Mrunalini, but I'm afraid my director is saying we're totally out of time. But I think this is a strong point to really come to an end at this point. All aspects discussed, debated. All of our panelists have said what they have to say. One thing is for sure, as India decides the way forward to delimitation, political discourse is critical, because with political if there is no political discourse, the cost is going to be directly on women and families for that matter. But nonetheless, political discourse has to be the way forward, center and states working it together. Poonam Muttreja, Dr. Lakshmi Ashwin Gowda, Professor Jyotsna Tirunagiri, Salem Dharnidharan, as well as Mrunalini Deshmukh, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your perspectives.